institutional economics, right? From here you can see the word institutional, that means institute. So later you will understand that institute here got formal and informal. Because formal will be like rule of law, we got court, we got police station. For police, then we have certain rights, property rights, contract, all these things are institution, right? And of course, it include the freedom of speech, others, political stability, then the quality of the governments. But institution not only restricted to formal institution, but we have also informal institution. That means something that, not to say control, something that guide us or constrain us. For example, custom, like let's say your parents will not allow you to sweep the floor during Chinese New Year, or for other things like many other things like custom, religion, or even your daily practice or something like that. Right? We have overview. Usually you see that in economics, thought is a battle between classic and Keynesian, and then neoclassic and Keynesian, all this thing, right? So the American political economy environment of the late 19th century lead to the many economics to question the neoclassic school, right? Classic and neoclassic school, that minimum government interference produce maximum social welfare. That is the classic school or neoclassic school belief. Minimum government intervention is for administrative tasks only, right? So there's not concern about monopoly, poverty, depression, and wastage, right? The movement for social control and reform will gather momentum, and this is what the institutional economic growth. So when you say that minimum government intervention will provide maximum social welfare, in this case, they assume this will assume that competition do exist, but in reality, you see the social welfare did not be maximized, poverty increased, right? And income inequality become bigger. There is a monopoly, not much competition become less. So therefore, started this thought of institutional economy. What is the two major methods of achieve social change? So first, how do they change? Reorganize society along the social line. I mean, more institutional economic. Earlier institutional economic is seen as a more like a social economics, a social welfare economic, where they give more focus on the welfare rather than the economics, right? Together, undertake social reform that is anomaly condition through the government intervention in the economy. So neoclassic say that minimum government intervention, but early institutional economics say that you need government intervention. Right? Webber was critical of the social movement and favored the radical reconstruction of society. The institutional school he found reflect the reformist approach. The change brought by a New Deal, for example, were greatly influenced. Right? So, what are the major tenets of institutional school? This is the generalization of the institutional school. You see some of the thinker may be follow few and then they may be deviate a bit from a few, right? But generally, the major tenet, the major principle of the institutional school are these few. Number one, holistic perspective. Economy must be explained as a whole rather than examined as a small part of a separate entity, isolate from the whole. So usually as a whole mean you include every other aspect, like include social welfare and this thing, right? Political economy, all this you must take into consideration. In the economic activity, there are also patterns of collective action that are greater than the sum of the part. Maybe in normal language or layman language, you say there is a synergy, right? So if there's a collective action, then they may be better. So therefore, like if let's say classic marginalist school of thought may not be really explained, right? If you put in one label, you give you one output, put in two label, you give you two output, but maybe you put in three label, they may give you 6 output, they work together much better, right? This The second, focus on institution. Right? This school emphasizes the role of institution in the economic life. An institution, not merely an organization, but an organized pattern of group behavior, right? Well established and accepted as a fundamental part of the culture. Right? That means this not really restricted to formal institution like law, rights, right, freedom, but this include custom, social habit, laws, mode of thinking, and way of living. Right? For example, previously, long time ago, before the Renaissance, right, people live just so that like they do not focus on their current living, like you do not focus on what you do now, right? But they are more focused on the after living. I mean, after they die, what do they do? So they try to tend to focus on after living. But then after Renaissance, and of course some others reform like Protestant ethic, right? They are more focused on current, how to improve current life. Then they really, the whole civilization really, or human mankind really grow faster. Right? So the way of living and the mode of thinking is also different. Like you sometimes you heard also, new generation nowadays become lazy, right? They just want to spoon feed all these things. So this another mode of thinking. So if this is true, then everyone become want to give minimum effort to get maximum return, right? So you may have a free rider, all this thing, right? So in this case, in future, your cost of economy to slow down, right? Something like that. Right? Darwinian evolution approach. The evolution approach should be used in economic analysis because society and institutions are constantly changing. Right? So what the theory that originate maybe 20 years, 50 years, or 100 years ago may not be applicable because it's changing. Right? The evolution and function of the economic institution in the central theme of the economic. This approach requires knowledge of not only economics, but also history, cultural, anthropology, political, sociology, philosophy, and psychology. Okay? Reaction number 4, rejection of the idea of normal equilibrium. Classic school always emphasize on normal equilibrium of, for example, supply and demand, right? Institutionalists emphasize the principle of secular causation, the cumulative chain that may be either helpful or harmful in seeking economic and social goal, right? Maladjustment in economic life are not departure from normal equilibrium, but rather they are themselves normal. For example, if let's say the equilibrium price is 6 ringgit, but then later you see why is selling at 7 ringgit, why is selling at 8 ringgit, why is selling at 9 ringgit. For classic school, you think it's normal. Very soon you will go back to the equilibrium price 6 ringgit. But for institutional, right, it may not be normal. You look at Malaysia case, right, price, like let's say food price, right, usually will increase quite a lot. Just before the Chinese New Year, they say it's a tradition or whatever. But after they say after Chinese New Year will reduce back. But after Chinese New Year, you see, for example, one bowl of meat, let's say 6 ringgit, they increase to 7 ringgit. Right? They say they will reduce back to 6 ringgit after Chinese New Year, but after Chinese New Year, they will reduce to 6 ringgit 50 cents. So still increase 50 cents, right? So the deviation is actually not deviation from normal, but itself is a normal. Pledge of interest, it will be interesting. People are cooperative, collective creatures. They organize themselves into group, mutual self-interest, and become common interest, right? So, like, if you believe in classic school, individuals try to maximize their own benefit, but here they try to group themselves, they become more powerful, right? Or more negotiation power to maximize the group benefit as well, right? There are clash of interest between group, like such a big business against small business, right? Some big business will be against some rules that prevent them to become monopoly and favor the small business. Then consumer against producer, consumer will want more, producer will want more profit, consumer will want more utility. Employer against worker. That's why sometimes you see a controversial that some company actually do not allow worker union, right? Then they sometimes undermine the worker union, all these things, right? Of course, you can also see the management against the normal staff, right? All these things, they are in group, so they are clash of interest. A representative and impartial government must reconcile or overriding clashes of interest. Number 6, liberal and democratic reform. The institutionalists expose reform in order to bring about more equitable distribution of wealth and income, right? So again, as earlier you see, they are not only focus on the economics issue or economic matter, they also focus on social economic issue, right? Inequality, all these things. They condemn laissez-faire and favor a larger role of government in the economics and social affairs. Of course, you can say that not only institutionalists fit this one, condemn laissez-faire and favor a larger role. You notice the Keynesians also favor larger role in economics, right? All these things, right? Even Marxism, they favor completely government control. So, but you see later on, you notice that the new institution economics, they actually do not condemn laissez-faire, but they are just as something in between the classic institution economics and the classic school. Of course, this one, rejection of plane and pressure, like you learn that the utility, they are based on this analysis, but here it's a bit different. Even you can skip. Among the so-called earlier or classics institution economic thought thinker is this called Thomson Veblen. Here are some of his background, right? You'll be surprised that he had never reached the full rank of professor, right? Because his view is different from the public view. It's like if your view is different from the government view, then you may not get promotion, or you're different from the management view, you may not get promotion. So despite that he is an extremely important people, his thought is become the founder of the institution economics, but he is never become a full rank of professor, right? So one of his first and most popular book will be The Theory of Leisure Class. This theory of leisure class introduced this term called conspicuous consumption. So the leisure class is characterized by this conspicuous consumption, a propensity to avoid useful work and conservatism, right? Okay, we start with some of his idea or his thought, especially the leisure class, and in this case, this leisure class associated with this conspicuous consumption. Leisure, of course, you see, do nothing, very free. So this class actually try to do nothing to show that they are a high class, honor, prestige, very successful, wealthy person, right? So if you're working like an ant, work every day, I mean, you're just like worker class, no class one, right? No honor, no prestige, but you just spend your life shopping, watch TV, enjoy. So they consider, they'll try to, they mean that, oh, you have too many money, then only you can enjoy this one, so the leisure class. So how to get people know you are the leisure class? One of it is a conspicuous consumption. So what is conspicuous consumption? Later on, Weber held that the leisure class is engaged in predatory seizure of goods without working on them. They will consume but will not produce. In which consume in a way that display their wealth, right? Because a show of wealth indicates power. So you buy, if you eat in a mama store, then you show that you have no power, you have no wealth, right? You wear a a shirt buy from Pasar Malam, you have no wealth. But if you eat at a 5-star restaurant, or you wear a blueberry shirt, then of course you have power, you have prestige, your honor, or you're successful, right? So this thing. So modern evidence of conspicuous consumption mean that, and this another mean conspicuous consumption mean that to consume just to show off, right? Some of the modern evidence is parade of yachts common in coastal city in United States. Porsche and Mercedes is considered extremely expensive and not affordable for me, but become so common for the member of the leisure class. For the rich, they are so common. When the rich meet the rich, they say, "Aya, you still drive Mercedes? Ayo, I drive Bentley already. Actually, I do not know Rolls Royce. I do not know how much they cost lah. But it seems that Rolls Royce and Bentley is much more expensive than Mercedes lah. But for me, I think Mercedes is already the most expensive. Right? So I do not belong to the leisure class. So conspicuous consumption. So where in this case, they are also called wearable good and an upsloping demand curve. In a microeconomic, when you study the demand curve should be sloping down, but there is also upward sloping demand curve for given good. But in this case, given good, why they upward sloping? Because given good is extremely inferior good. So why they upward sloping? Because when the price of a given good increase, these extremely poor people will not substitute the given good with normal good because of the income effect. Price of given good increase, they will actually impact negatively on the income. So income effect will actually cause them to substitute, can consume less normal good. Then they have to even buy more given good, right? So it's still upward sloping. But in this case, upward sloping also may represent this called wearable good or conspicuous consumption, because the higher the price, the rich people will be buy even more to show off, right, for conspicuous consumption, right? So his theory that some consumer buy luxury goods mainly for their conspicuous consumption appeal that had been integrated into neoclassic analysis. For example, some people buy expensive automobile for the purpose of displaying their wealth. In other words, mean show off only lah, right? Owning this expensive car apparently confers status and sort of utility, and independent of the car is intrinsic utility. Sometimes also, last time I've been told by a friend, if you are salesperson, for example, if you're insurance agent, right, was our store only lah, right? You go and meet customer, especially when you want to fetch customer for business stock, right? Insurance agent. If you fetch them with a very cheap car, small car, can't chill lah, right? All this, they'll think that I think you're not so successful. Why? Because I think you're no good. If you fetch them with a Mercedes lah, Bentley lah, wow, how can you buy? Oh, because I'm very successful. I have a lot of customer trust me. You see, I got a business, so you should also trust me. So you see, show of success, right? Conspicuous consumption may be a show of success too, right? But in this case, for the very, very rich one, not only show of success, when they can show off their success, it's actually a source of utility. Like for example, you like then they buy a Bentley car, very expensive car, they can also fetch them everywhere. So consumption, but another way of utility also, they feel proud, they feel happy to drive it. So it's a source of utility. Wearable good due not only intrinsic utility, but also conspicuous consumption utility, with the latter directly related to price, right? Conspicuous consumption utility, like you eat one apple, you feel very satisfied because you like apple. But if you eat one extremely expensive apple at an extremely expensive 5-star restaurant, the apple will cost you 100 times price more. You feel even more proud. So you have this so-called conspicuous consumption utility. Propensity to avoid work. So this leisure class try to avoid work. They won't work. They will avoid useful productive work, but they must indulge only in wasteful or useless tasks if they are to remain reputable. So their task is just to hi, buy, shopping, for example lah. Okay, so to remain reputable. Conservatism. Evolution of social structure has been a process of natural selection of institutions. So it's change the changing circumstances. The development of this institution represent the development of society. Okay. Beside the theory of leisure class, this variable also known as the attack on neoclassic economics. So his criticism of neoclassic economics also represent the criticism of institutional school of thought to neoclassic, also represent the difference between, of course, in this case, is the early thought of institutional economics and the neoclassic, right? Neoclassic economic, which assume that consumers are sovereign, they are independent, and who their dollar work, consumer determine the composition of commodity produce and therefore allocate the society resources that will maximize welfare. That means the consumer will determine how much they buy and therefore what they buy, therefore what the producer should produce. By if large portion of the consumption are undertaken mainly to impress neighbor who try to retain by purchasing similar items, of course this is also related to conspicuous consumption, right? Or the theory of racial class. So when who try to retain by purchasing similar item to maintain their relative status, then government might be able to enhance overall well-being by restricting wasteful consumption by everyone. Right? So Veblen is making economics man into a social man, upset the laissez-faire policy implication of neoclassic consumption theory. So you think that government should control this so-called conspicuous consumption or wasteful consumption. For example, okay, expensive car being taxed extensively, non-expensive car didn't tax, right? So and the tax collected from the expensive car will be used for, let's say, to build a hospital, to build public park, so for other welfare matters, right? To give scholarship to students, right? Webber in effect also accused that neoclassic of supporting the present scheme of the distribution of wealth and income. Business economy has been developed to defend the business community. Webber also concerned with social economy instead of business business of economic price, profit, and ownership. You see here, business economics has been developed to defend the business community. Earlier, you have a principle of the economic. They are act in a collective group, right? So the business group will try to say, no, you don't tax us because it's not fair. So, but the consumer group will also has their say. But in this case, of course, for Keynesian, Marxism also the same, and for Weber also, they think that the negotiation between business class and the social class is biased. I mean, the business class actually have more power. So in this case, the collective action of this business class will have an impact on the welfare of the worker, right? Then finally, it's interesting to note that Weber attacked on the notion of perfect competition. In classic school and neoclassic school, in neoclassic school, of course, you have studied before. They deviate a bit. In classic school, they assume perfect competition. And with perfect competition or extreme high competition, to bring social good. But later on, neoclassic also deviate a bit. They claim that competition may not always be perfect or not always be intense. There are some way of non-competition element, right? But this Weber actually attacked the notion of perfect competition much earlier, right? I mean, attacking the very principle of the classic school, which then dominate the standard economic theory. Now, in the micro, you still study monopolistic competition, oligopoly, and monopoly, right, of the non-perfect competition aspect. So he recognized that most businessmen had some monopolistic control over price, and they charge and they use the advertising to strengthen their market position. Later on, another economics will present a theory, right, on this one, right, the Gray Bill. The analysis published in 1904 foreshadowed the rise of the theory of monopolistic competition in 1933. The theory of monopoly in 1933, but this knowledge has already been criticized by Veblen, I think about 30 years ahead. So he's 30 years ahead of time, right? Another aspect of his thought will be instead of workmanship, whom humanity created triumph over other species is a struggle for survival, right? And has been a superior ability to control the forces of environment, right? So if you're very hot, you can have even air cons, right? You can control environment, but others animal may not be able, right? So it's not people for effort, but for achievement that really matter. So in his thinking, right, the effort is not important. The achievement is important, right? So you can see this thinking, or sometimes people say that no matter what you achieve, as long as you try your best already, then it's good enough. But for him, you try your best, but you still cannot achieve your goal, then it's not good enough. Like you are football fan, also you'll see that, oh, you play interesting and exciting football, even though you lost, then it's okay. Or but in this Veblen school of thought, you say that no, even though you play very extremely boring football, you defend all the time, as long as you win 1-0, then it's okay. So right. So in this case, because they focus on achievement, so the two objectives of the firm is namely production of good and profit. Now you see that these two objectives, right? The production of goods is also merely as a mean to achieve profit. And if these two goal has a conflict, right, then the process is not important. To produce how many goods is not important. The achievement, I mean the final outcome, which is profit, is more important. So the business will choose profit, right? So therefore, when these two go conflict, the former is sacrificed. I mean the production of goods is sacrificed to the later for profit. Example, they will restrict the output to raise the price and get even more profit, right? Instead of they produce 1,000 goods, they may just produce 10 and they sell at an extremely high price, so the total profit is even higher than they produce 1,000. Of course, if they produce 1,000, it's better for social welfare, right? But when making money takes precedence over making goods, then the instinct for workmanship and is minimized, because production come to the rated in terms of celebrity, right? And of course profit. So don't need workmanship. You work so hard and you workmanship, you try to make a very perfect quality good, but you get profit like $1, then it's better to make a standardized good and you get profit $1, you get profit $3, right? So something like that. Okay. Then credit and business cycle is also one of the top, but of course this credit and business cycle is being criticized heavily as well. Okay. Credit play a special role in modern business. The competition use credit in extending business operations, so they borrow money to differential advantage against other. Those businesses that can borrow money, they can expand faster, they can last longer when you have a recession, right? But credit especially has no aggregate effect. The earning or total in industry output, aggregate net profit from industry are reduced by the amount of the interest. So if the business borrow profit, they expand or they want to for safety net or whatever, and in future they need to repay back, but you could include the interest, right? Must be paid to creditor outside the industrial process, and this creditor get the interest do not involve in production of goods. So this money amount of interest go outside of the industrial process. When Veblen negligent, of course, the fact that the bank credit enable firm to mobilize supply of labor among those who are unemployed. So people criticize that, okay, even though the firm borrow money to expand, then you have a negative interest, interest. But if because of the firm borrow to expand, then you're able to mobilize the supply of labor, so you can create more job opportunities, so you can reduce unemployment, right? So credit also permit the mobilization of the raw material, capital equipment, as expansion of the supply. Okay? Labor structure on credit would only be valid if the supply and factor production and the final product were perfectly fixed. Right? If all these are fixed, then only Veblen theory is correct. But anyway, his theory on the credit actually lead him directly to the business cycle theory. Right? Nowadays, in business, especially if you study international business, you always say it's business cycle. You have a business growing very, very fast, then peak, and then recession, and then recovery, and then peak, and then recession. Right? So business cycle. So the extension of the credit enable competing businessmen to build up prices. Right? Automatically, so the price increase. Of course, in this case, the profit increase. As a dollar value increase, this serve as a corrector. So if good business, right, well, then everything increase, so they actually serve it as a corrector for further extension, right? It's just like the same concept, like everybody invest to buy house. So when so many people demand to buy house just for investment or just to keep to sell further or for rent, then the house price go up, and then they use the previous rebought house as a collateral to buy new house. So then in this case, the house it increase again until sooner or later the discrepancy arises between money value and the collateral, right? which the collateral rise faster. So the house is actually valued at 500,000, but now worth 3 million. Oh no! So it's a discrepancy, a rise so big, and the capitalized value of the property compute on expected earnings lower. Then so many right, for example, this when the discrepancy become obvious, a period of liquidation begins. So you notice that then there is a price down, right? So along with the liquidation, credit cancellation, shrinking of capitalization, and reduced output. So credit take over business. So in this case, when the business fail during good time and then peak and then suddenly recession, business fail, they have to close down. Only the big business can stand, right? And some small business even been taken over by the big business or the creditor. So you see they are further consolidating the ownership and the control in a fewer hands, right? Worker benefit during prosperity through a higher rate of pay but fuller employment, but the general price level increase, so the real wages also decrease, right? For example, now if inflation increase, your boss pay you very few, let's say 2% increase of your salary, but inflation increase 5%, then you still have a lower real wages. Okay, these things are very interesting because you look at this question. First, we come back. Independent effect. Yeah, let's say I ask you this question: will consumers still want to buy flower to their loved one during Valentine? I mean, it's a guy. Are you still want to buy flower for your favorite girls, right, or your girlfriend, or right? If such day does not exist or not promoted for celebration, if you rewind back or you go to metaverse, a different dimension or different world, and during that metaverse world, no such day as Valentine Day. So if you suddenly go to another world, do you still buy flower for your loved one? If our loved one say, why suddenly you buy? Right? Will others also buy flower for the first one? Right? So this is a question that this Gabriel I will try to explain. Right? So this some of the bio data of this one. So Gabriel measure, I think, constitute both the attack on neoclassic economics and analysis of modern economics. So one of them is a dependent effect and a theory of behavior of the firm. The dependent effect, modern capitalists dominate the large enterprise, right, through product, corporate planning and massive advertising, right. In this case, Gabriel say it's a revised sequence. Producer decided what shall be produced and then mold the consumer taste to buy the product they want. In classic school is that consumer want to buy what? They have money to buy, then only producer will produce what the consumer want to buy. But in this case, the Gabriel said that, you see, the consumer maximize their utility. Gabriel back the important question of how the consumer go about formulating the want. So like, consumer want what, producer buy what. But in the first place, how do you get this one? You have this one, right? Oh, you want to buy flower for your girlfriend, right? Why you only get this one? Because the producer actually promoting this so-called Valentine Day. So this one must be created through advertising and how urgent they can be, right? So in this case, his thought is the reverse, right? Not that class are different from the classic school. So in Gabriel theory of consumer demand has an important policy implication. There will be an under-allocation of resources to public good. The situation is termed as a social imbalance, the creation of artificial one. So they create artificial one. They purposely create something that to make you want it, but it's not important. Right? It will not improve the social welfare, right? Through advertising ship, right? Through a private good. So like, for example, new automobile seen as more important of being than the new road, or new automobile is more important than public transport, right? So what's the remedy? Impose sales tax on the consumer goods and services, especially those that they think is not benefited to the social society, using to proceed with increase the availability of the public good and service. Like classical institutional economics, but now you have another traditional institutional economics, you have now new institutional economics. So the traditional institutionalism or the traditional institutional economics associated with the Veblen, Gabriel, Mitchell, right? Generally is generally critical of the neoclassic economics. They are overall they are critical, then and supportive of government intervention. But in contrast, the new institution economics tend to be theoretical, market-oriented, and anti-intervention. Right? You see that even though both are for institutionalism, but later one is a bit different. Just like a classic school and the neoclassic school, you see they'll be a bit different. Right? There are several identifiable strengths of the new institutionalist school, which emphasize the importance of institution in understanding economic or even political behavior and outcome. For example, the role of property rights in promoting economic efficiency, even though in your micro 2, also when you micro 2, you study the version of the Ronald kiosk, right? The property right, and the kiosk theorem. So like if a factory in the upstream of the river pollute the river, that cause the fish to die, and then the fishermen income affected. So how you settle this one, right? Who should pay who? So in this case, you depend on who has the property rights of the river, right? If the factory has the property of the river, the fisherman will have to pay the factory to reduce the pollution. If the fisherman has the property right, then the factory will have to pay compensation to the fisherman. So property right? Earlier and promote economic efficiency. Relationship between law and economic. Transaction cost in explaining the organization of behavior, the firm, loan cost. Of course, here the role of transaction cost in explaining the organization is a degree. This theoretical come up with the idea in his degree thesis, and then he won a Nobel Prize maybe 50 or 60 years later based on his degree thesis. So in your degree FYP, maybe one day you will use your degree FYP to win a Nobel Prize. Public choice theory include analysis of rent seeking, interest group, voting rules. They got one subject. You have this first subject. I'm not sure. Forget public economics, public welfare economics. That one is elective subject. You also study this so-called voting rules, interest group, rent seeking, right? Constitutional economics. And the most important of them all is a thought of this so-called Douglas North, because he's assumed to be like contribute significantly to this so-called new institutionalism, right? He's an American economics historian who won the 1993 Nobel Prize for his work. Not right when you do your research or your final project or thesis or assignment, we mention institutional school of thought, then usually you don't quote Veblen, Mitchell, and Gravitt, but we usually quote Not, right? To not criticize neoclassic economics for its failure to recognize the importance of institutional constraint. So neoclassic actually completely do not recognize institutional constraint because the free market preferable to be extremely minimum government intervention, right? No, but he may criticize to not recognize for importance of institutional in the economic decision making and its inability to explain the permanence of the diverse economic institution throughout the world. And in short, mean that okay, every economics has let's say same capital, same money supply, everything is the same, right? But they have different outcome. They have different economic growth, different economic structure, right? Why? Because different institutional factor. So unlike traditional economics, not embrace the neoclassic choice theoretic approach, which emphasizes the rational economic decision making. So here what he said, institutions are a creation of human beings. They evolve and are altered by human. Hence, our theory must begin with the individual. At the same time, the constraints that institution impose on the individual choice are pervasive. And for the classic or traditional institution, they only focus on how the role of institution, how they put a constraint, how they actually shape the economy. But for a classic school, they only focus on the individual, right? They don't care about institution. They say perfect competition, free market will settle everything. It's preferable to be zero government intervention or minimum, right? But this not seem to be go in between. I mean, like the consolidate between the traditional institutionalism and the classic school, right? So they say both also important. Yes, individual choice is important and start to individual choice, but this individual choice will actually be influenced and or constrained by the institution. Like for example, right, you want to watch like now some of the movie being banned in Malaysia, right, due to some reason. If you want to watch, let's say for example, which one movie being banned? Let's say Thor. Can you watch? No. So your individual want and supply and demand is being constrained by the institution as well, right? So institution come into being because they minimize human interaction cost. So because of you have institution, you know there's a law here, they have court, they have police to catch you if you try to steal things or this thing, right? Then you will you no need. Then if you say you have law and order, right? Peaceful, though you may need to hire 1,000 security guard in your house and put 1,000 CCTVs, right, in your factory. So something like that lah. So because of there's a law and order or institutional quality is good, so they minimize human interaction cost, they minimize the business cost. They can be formal like constitution and law or informal unwritten code of conduct, right? Or ethic, right? Custom, tradition, right? Religion, belief, who specifically created or some specifically created like unit monetary system or simply evolve over time, right? Traditional of giving attitude, right? Sometimes this simply evolve over time is a bit uh, dangerous, right? Like for example, sometimes it may be good, sometimes it may be bad. For example, simply water like previously, women or girls are not allowed for education. They just stay at home, right, do housework. But then later on, you see that the society thinking evolved that women should be given equal right or education. And then later on, now that evolved that women should be given equal right in everything. So therefore, in every organization, they must ensure that there must be a woman leader or woman manager, right? A woman president or a woman cabinet minister. So you see, this one is a institutional constraint. Of course, they may be good and they may be bad. For example, the tradition of giving gratitude. Last time, well, you think you help a lot, you help us a lot. Then I give you some fruits as a gratitude. Then later on, you may evolve into I give you some money as a gratitude. Then later on, I give you some money so that you can make things easier. So from gratitude may evolve until become a corruption, and corruption when evolve later on, it become a norm. Right? It's a normal for you to pay some money, and then you get pass. For example, you go on driving test, so it become a norm like you should have pay money. Like if no pay money, you will not pass. So later on, this will become a informal institution. Right? So institutions are the formal and informal rules that govern economics and political behavior. In contrast, the player are individual organizations that exploit the opportunity to provided within a particular institutional structure. Right? The form that institution take owns much to the bargaining power of individual and group representing them. But once institutions are in place, the behavior and outcome of individual choice reinforce the institution continue present. Right? So the individual will right have through the bargaining power create the institution, and then after that something that their interplay a more dynamic aspect. As a result of the reinforcement, a nation institution are path dependent, right? So the institutional path are first selected or imposed to determine the path long taken, and institutional gradually evolve because the players sometimes succeed in getting the rule changed in their favor, right? So only when a particular institution path is dead end or to achieve desired objective, or when the desired objective themselves change, do society radically alter the institution. And so whether this of course they may include some of the very reform or something, drastic reform, right? Institutional constraints vary both through time and across countries. The institution provide the incentive structure for various type of economic and political activity. So here, generally, we assume that good institution or high institutional quality will promote economic growth, will promote business, and will be good for everything, right? But of course, you can still criticize that how they define this so-called good institution, right? Good institutional quality. So if you have to do a research and a final project, you think institutional quality as a variable. Usually people will take the worldwide governance indicator because the indicator is available free widely in the World Bank database, right? Or another one will be international credit guide risk. That one you need to pay a lot of money. So anyway, you use the proxy from as a institutional quality, then and maybe you want to do a determinant of economic growth. So you use a proxy for institutional quality, then you expected it to be a positive relationship, right? Because through this institutional economic school of thought, better institution, that means you have a political stability, freedom, then rule of law, then you promote economic growth, rather than you have war everywhere, and then the jurisdiction cannot be trusted, and then corruption everywhere. So in this case, you will not promote economic growth. So you expected a positive relationship, right? Then still continue on the Douglas not thinking about the new institutional economics. Wealthy nations essentially are wealthy because their institutional constraints define a set of payoff to political and economic activity that encourage education, skill acquisition, capital expansion, new technology, and thus economic growth. Not only related to this, they also enhance stability, transparency, and everything they consider is good, right? And then, of course, in this case, is deemed to be promote economic growth. Therefore, as I mentioned, you should expect a positive relationship, right? Poor nations are poor because their institution define a set of payoff to, again, political and economic activity that discourage wealth creation. For example, corruption, war, right? All these things, right? And the government may want to invest too much on building military equipment or saying, right? Property rights are poorly defined and enforced. Fighters might enter the government or immigrate, right? Social and religious custom limited work and disparage material gain, right? Wealth redistribution given more emphasis than wealth creation. And so you have some of the formal and informal institutions that restrict economic growth and restrict the progress of the society. And not new institutionalism thought is a merger between traditional neoclassic analysis and the analysis of institution, right? It's also been seen as a merger between the traditional institution and the classic school. Okay? By doing so, he explained how institutions affect economic choice and how economic choice gradually altered the institution. So he take into consideration of interaction of both institution and individual or economic choice. Right? Classic school only take into consideration of the individual only. Institution actually play no role because minimum just for administrative purposes only. But for traditional institutional school of thought, right? Individual choice are extremely constrained or being influenced by institution. So Douglas not come in, or the new institution is actually a go between or a merger between these two lah. Okay, how the merger institution affect economic choice and economic choice gradually alter the institution.